Will your homeowner's insurance cover water damage? It depends, and the answer might surprise you. So imagine you came home from work and there's water on your kitchen floor, and while looking at the puddle, you see a drop hit. You look up, and there's a wet stain on the ceiling. You call a plumber, they open up the wall, and it turns out a pipe fitting failed. The water's been running a few hours, it soaked the subfloor, damaged the ceiling, and ruined some drywall. You file a claim, which ends up getting covered, thankfully, and you're done. Now imagine the same house, the same pipe, but this time it wasn't a sudden failure. It's been dripping for months. There's mold behind the wall, the subfloor is rotting, the damage is actually worse. You filed a claim and it's denied. How could that be? Same water, same pipe, but a completely different outcome? Most homeowners don't find that out until they're standing in it. There are actually 5 different types of water damage your policy treats differently. Some are covered, some are excluded entirely, and a couple of them you can fix for about $50 a year if you know to ask. So let's talk about why this happens and what you can actually do about it. My name is Jim Eddington. I run an insurance agency. Water damage questions are some of the most common calls we get here. So let me walk you through how this actually works. The entire coverage decision on water damage comes down to 2 words, sudden and accidental. That's the line your policy draws. A standard homeowner's policy, what the industry calls an HO3, covers water damage that is sudden and accidental. A pipe bursts because it froze in the middle of winter. A washing machine hose fails while you're at work and floods the laundry room. A water heater ruptures out of nowhere. These are sudden events. They weren't predictable, they weren't gradual, and they weren't something you neglected. Your policy covers these because that's exactly the kind of unexpected loss insurance exists to protect against. Now, what your policy does not cover, and this is where most of the surprises happen, is water damage that comes from long-term issues, gradual deterioration, or lack of maintenance. That slow drip behind the wall that's been going on for months, that's not sudden and accidental. That's a maintenance issue. And the insurance company's position is that you're responsible for maintaining your property. If a slow leak causes damage over time because it went undetected or unaddressed, that's not something they consider an insurable event. That's deferred maintenance. And they're not wrong. Insurance is designed to cover sudden, unexpected losses, not the gradual consequences of a home aging and things wearing out. Here's the tricky part, though. The line between sudden and gradual isn't always obvious when you're the one dealing with the damage. You discover water behind a wall. Was it from a fitting that failed last week? Or has it been seeping for 6 months? Sometimes that's genuinely hard to tell, and the answer determines whether your claim gets paid. The adjuster is going to look at the extent of the damage, the condition of the materials, whether there's mold or rot, all indicators of how long water has been present. If the evidence suggests that it's been going on a while, that claim is getting classified as gradual, and that's an exclusion. That's not the insurance company being adversarial, they're just applying the terms of the contract. Now, let me get into the types of water damage that fall completely outside your standard policy, because this is where the biggest financial hits happen. Flood. And I mean water that enters your home from outside. Rising water levels, storm surge, overflowing rivers, heavy rainfall that overwhelms drainage. That is not covered under your homeowner's policy at all. It doesn't matter if it was sudden, doesn't matter if you had no warning. Flood is a separate peril, and it requires a separate policy, usually through the National Flood Insurance Program or a private flood insurer. And this one gets people. A lot of homeowners just assume that because they have insurance, they're covered if their house floods. They're not. Not unless they specifically purchased flood insurance, and the cost of that assumption is enormous. Flood damage can easily run into the tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I've talked to homeowners who found this out the hardest way possible. Sewer and drain backup. If a sewer line backs up and sends water into your basement, or a sump pump fails during heavy rain and your lower level floods, that's typically not covered under a standard policy either. This one really surprises people because it feels like it should be covered. Water came into the house, caused damage, and it wasn't your fault. But sewer backup is a specific exclusion on most standard policies. Now, here's the good news, and this might be the most important thing I tell you today. Sewer and drain backup is one of the most common and most affordable endorsements you can add. For a relatively small additional premium, you can get it added to your homeowner's policy. The limits vary. Some carriers offer $5,000, some go up to $25,000 and more, and the right amount depends on what's actually down there. So if you've got a finished basement with flooring, drywall, furniture, electronics, the potential loss from a sewer backup is significant, and that basic $5,000 endorsement is probably not going to cut it. Roof leaks, but maybe not the kind you're thinking of. This comes up a lot, especially after storms. If wind damages your roof and rain gets in through that damaged area, that's generally covered. The wind created an opening, rain came through, and the interior damage is part of the claim. But if your roof is just old and worn, and rain seeps in because the shingles have deteriorated over time, that's maintenance again. The insurance company is going to distinguish between damage from a covered event like wind, hail, or a fallen tree, and damage from the roof simply reaching the end of its useful life. If your 25-year-old roof is letting water in because it's 25 years old, that's not a claim, that's a roof replacement you need to budget for. Let me put some real numbers on this because this is where it stops being abstract and starts getting real. A sewer backup into a finished basement can easily cause $20,000 to $40,000 in damage. You're tearing out wet drywall, replacing flooring, dealing with contamination from sewage, replacing furniture and stored belongings. It adds up fast. And if you don't have the sewer backup endorsement, that entire bill is yours. A slow leak behind a shower wall that goes undetected for a year can run $15,000 to $20,000 or even more once you factor in mold remediation, structural repair, and replacing finished surfaces. And since that's gradual damage, your policy isn't paying for any of it. These are not extreme scenarios. These are the kinds of losses that happen in normal homes, in normal neighborhoods to people who assumed they were covered. Check whether you have sewer and drain backup coverage on your current policy. If you don't, call your agent and add it. It's the most common gap and the most affordable one to close. Ask what limits are available and pick one that actually reflects the value of what's in your lower level. If you're paying around $500 a year for homeowners insurance, adding sewer backup coverage might cost you another $40 to $60. For $25,000 in additional protection, the math is pretty hard to argue with. Look into flood insurance. And that includes areas that aren't in a designated flood zone because floods don't follow maps. It's often less expensive than people expect, especially in moderate risk areas. You don't want to discover you needed it after the fact. And beyond the coverage side, pay attention to maintenance. A lot of water damage claims that get denied could have been caught earlier. Check under sinks every now and then. Look for stains on ceilings. Pay attention to your water bill. If it spikes out of nowhere, that can mean there's a leak you can't see. Replace washing machine hoses before they fail. None of that is exciting, but it's the difference between a sudden pipe failure that gets covered and a slow leak that doesn't. Your insurance is there for the unexpected. The expected stuff, the aging, the wear, the gradual deterioration, that's on you as the homeowner. So here's where you should be after all of this. You know your homeowner's policy covers sudden and accidental water damage, but not gradual leaks or maintenance issues. You know that flood and sewer backup are excluded from your standard policy unless you've added separate coverage. You've got a realistic sense of what those gaps can cost in real dollars. And you know the two most straightforward things you can do to close them. Most homeowners have never had anyone walk them through these distinctions. Now you have. If you want help figuring out whether your policy has these gaps or you just want a clear picture of where you stand, there's a link in the description. That's what we do every day.